Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Rubin speaking to you from just east of Jerusalem. Today is the 13th day of the month of Tammuz, 5782. It's the 12th of July, 2022. This coming Shabbat, we read Parashat Pinchas from the book of Numbers, beginning with chapter 25, verse 10, concluding with chapter 30, verse 1. It's a long parasha, one of the longest, maybe the longest, I'm not sure. We're going to be talking all about Parashat Pinchas in just a few moments, but first I'd like to mention that this coming Shabbat is actually the 17th of Tammuz, Shva Esrei B'Tammuz, which is a fast day. Of course, we don't fast on Shabbat because Shabbat is Shabbat, and we celebrate Shabbat, and we have Oneg Shabbat, we enjoy Shabbat, so we never ever fast on Shabbat, God forbid. And if there is a fast day that falls on Shabbat, it gets nidche, it gets pushed off to the following day. So the 17th of Tammuz will actually be observed on the 18th of Tammuz. It is a dawn to dark fast, meaning it's not a full 24 or 25-hour fast like the 9th of Av is, but being that it always falls during the early summer, it's always one of the longest days of the year, so it's a very long fast, and of course it's in the hottest time of the year, so it's sometimes it could be the toughest fast, even though it's not a full 25-hour fast. But what happened exactly on the 17th of Av? Why are we fasting? It's one of the fast days mentioned in the book of Zechariah, who talks about the fast of the 4th, the fast of the 5th, the fast of the 7th, and the fast of the 10th. This is the fast of the 4th, because it's the 4th month of the year, beginning with Nisan. It's the 4th month, Tammuz. And the first catastrophe that occurred on the 17th of Tammuz was the breaking of the two luchot, the two tablets of the law, of the Torah, that Moshe broke when he came down from Mount Sinai and saw the people reveling around the golden calf. As we know, the 6th of Sivan, which is the day we celebrate Shavuot, the 6th of Sivan is the day that Israel received the Torah at Mount Sinai, and the 17th of Tammuz is actually 40 days later. So Moshe went up to Mount Sinai for 40 days and 40 nights, and he returned and saw that the people had fallen victim of their own proclivity to dance around a golden calf. And out of anger, it seems he shattered the two tablets of the law. There may have been another side to his action, that is that he, rather than see his people be in flagrant breach of this contract that he was bringing down, he shattered the contract so that they couldn't be held accountable, as it were. Of course, immediately after, he rounded up the people and said, "Whoever's on the side of HaShem, come with me," and many people died in internecine battle that day. So he took it very badly, let's say that. But it's very interesting because at the very concluding verse of the book of Deuteronomy, following his death, which we're going to be talking about that in today's Parashat Pinchas, but he doesn't actually die. His death is not recorded until those very last verses of the book of Deuteronomy. It mentions that no other prophet ever was in Israel like Moshe. In fact, I'm going to look for the verses right now. I didn't have this prepared. I'm sorry. I'm going to look for them right now. And it goes like this. Never again has there arisen, chapter 34, verse 10, final verses of the book of Deuteronomy. Never again has there arisen in Israel a prophet like Moses, whom HaShem had known face to face, as evidenced by all the signs and wonders that HaShem sent him to perform in the land of Egypt against Pharaoh and all the courtiers and all his land, and by all the strong hand and awesome power that Moshe performed before the eyes of all Israel. Strong hand, Hayad HaChazakah in Hebrew. What was that strong hand? our sages say that strong hand was the hands that he used to shatter the two luchot, the two tablets of the law on that day. That's first 17th of Tammuz, that goes down in infamy. So basically, it's very fascinating that at the very conclusion of the Torah, this bit of praise, our sages say, is referring to the fact that he shattered the two luchot, the two stones. But that really is a discussion for another day. I guess that's a discussion for when we finally read the final parsha of Deuteronomy, which of course is on Simchat Torah in a few months from now. But let's get back to our discussion of the 17th of Tammuz. The other things that happened on the 17th was that I believe in the first temple, the Tamid offering was the daily offering. And it had to be canceled because of the siege on the city, the encroaching army. It was during the Roman siege of Jerusalem in the year 70 CE that the city walls were breached on the 17th of Tammuz, leading just 3 weeks later to the destruction of the Holy Temple on the 9th of Av. So that is first and foremost in the tragedies that we are observing, reflecting on the 17th of Tammuz, because of course the 17th of Tammuz brings in a 3-week period of mourning that continues right up through the 9th of Av. And again, the 9th of Av this year will be on a Shabbat, just like the 17th of Tammuz. So the 9th of Av, Tisha B'Av, will be observed, the full 25-hour fast on the 10th of Av. That's what happens when the calendar falls out this way. But the period of mourning, it starts out with certain we don't have celebrations, public celebrations. We don't listen to music publicly. Certain signs of mourning that are also when a person is actually in mourning for a deceased loved one. They observe similar practices. And then as the month of Av comes in, depending on different customs, the mourning process gets a little stronger, a little harsher as we approach the 9th of Av. And as we've been saying on Temple Talk and everything that we do and say in the Temple Institute for many, many years, is that it's no longer, as we see it, the 3 weeks should no longer be, a period of mourning for something that we've lost and can't ever regain, as in the case of a loved one. When you lose a loved one, they're gone, and we mourn, and we never get over that. We can't undo that. We can't do a reset. It just doesn't work that way. But in the case of, and the fact of the matter is, throughout thousands of years, almost 2,000 years in the exile, there was nothing, within the power of any single Jewish individual or community to make a difference concerning the destruction of the Holy Temple. But now we have a state, that we're independent, that we have Jerusalem, that we have the Temple Mount, that we're a sovereign people back in our land, and that God has wrought for us so many miracles in this modern era. The idea of simply mourning for the loss of the Holy Temple seems anachronistic. It just doesn't really apply anymore. And many Jews do that. They simply mourn, and it's just been, it's a routine. You mourn 3 weeks. 3 weeks are up. You go on your way, and life is good, and you don't think about the Holy Temple after that. But the fact of the matter is that is changing, not just amongst us who work at the Temple Institute or our listening audience and many others. There are many, many, many people today, especially here in Israel, where it's really front and center, that say, yeah, the time has come to get serious. And we do have the power to move toward the rebuilding of the Holy Temple and to move toward making that a reality. And that's hopefully what we're doing. So, as we are about to enter into this 3-week period, I ask of you listeners to not simply reflect on past tragedies, but to think about what's happening today, to think about what you can do in one way or another, small or large, to help bring about the rebuilding of the Holy Temple, and to consider the change that a fully functioning Holy Temple could make in the world, a place of worship for all faiths, a house of prayer for all nations, a place where we're all equal before Hashem, a place where Hashem's presence is so present that we can be there with Hashem. And so much of modern life is full of angst and emptiness and loneliness and lack of meaning, it seems, lack of purpose, lack of direction. All those things can be overcome in a holy temple. Now, those are my thoughts, my beliefs. So ponder those things, especially in the upcoming 3 weeks. That is my request to you. Let's talk about Parashat Pinchas. Pinchas, of course, comes right on the heels of Parashat Balak, and it's really a continuation. It begins with the continuation of the story that ended, the story of Balak, and that, of course, is the Israelites slip into licentiousness and idolatry. And of course, at the very conclusion of Parashat Balak, after Bilam goes his way, after making with his will, against his will, that's a debate. The most beautiful blessings that could be made concerning the people of Israel, and made a prophecy, a future prophecy about the end of days, and Israel's triumph at the conclusion of history. You couldn't ask for more. And then all of a sudden, immediately following that, Israel does one of its periodic collapses into what they shouldn't be doing. In this case, it was consorting with the daughters of Moab, and then getting enticed into worshiping the god of Moab, a god called Baal Peor, which our sages tell us was a god whose worship involved, sorry for saying this, defecating in front of an idol. It sounds bizarre. There were many bizarre practices in idolatry in those days, but this is obviously a case of a real collapse of morality and self-respect, and certainly a brazen violation of the Torah. And this was going on, and Hashem was enraged and caused a plague to begin to devastate Israel. And at the climax of this crisis, we read that, going back again to chapter 25, verse 6, "Behold, a man of the children of Israel came and brought a Midianite woman near to his brothers in the sight of Moshe, and in the sight of the entire assembly of the children of Israel, and they were weeping at the entrance of the tent of meeting." Now he brought this woman here. They were doing something that they should not have been doing in public, in front of the tent of meeting, that is the tabernacle. And it was the most brazen challenge to the Torah and to the authority of Moshe and to decency. And this man, we'll find out in the beginning of Parashat Pinchas, was no ordinary man. He was the head, tribal head of the tribe of Shimon. And the people were weeping, meaning they were devastated by what was going on, but nobody knew what to do, and Moshe seemed to not know how to respond to this. And then we read, Pinchas, son of Elazar, son of Aharon the Kohen, saw, and he stood up from amid the assembly and took a spear in his hand. He followed the Israelite man into the tent and pierced them both, the Israelite man and the woman, into her stomach, and the plague was halted from upon the children of Israel. Those who died in the plague were 24,000. That is the conclusion of last week's Parashat Balak. And this week's Parashat Pinchas begins thusly, and I'm going to read in Hebrew, then in English. Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe lemor Pinchas ben Eleazar ben Aharon Kohen heshiv et hamati me'al bnei Yisrael bekana'o et kina'ati betocham v'lo chiliti et bnei Yisrael bekina'ati lachen emor hineni noten lo et briti shalom. Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying, Pinchas, the son of Eleazar, son of Aharon the Kohen, turned back my wrath from upon the children of Israel when he zealously avenged my vengeance upon them. So I did not consume the children of Israel in my vengeance. Therefore say, behold, I give him my covenant of peace. Wow, Brit Shalom. And it shall be for him and his offspring after him a covenant of eternal priesthood, because he took vengeance for his God and he atoned for the children of Israel. Okay, so one question is, well, if he was grandson of Aharon, wasn't he a Kohen? Wasn't he destined to be a Kohen and his children to be Kohanim? Actually, the answer is that at the time that the Kahuna, the priesthood, was established, it was for Aharon and his sons. He wasn't born yet. How's it go? I made a post, we put a post up yesterday concerning this. So I'm going to consult right now. So I don't want to get it wrong. It's pretty simple, but I'm just going to quote the Rashi, his commentary. The Kuhuna, the priest, had already been given to Aaron's descendants. It had been given only to Aaron and his sons, who were anointed with him, and to their children, whom they would beget after the anointment. Pinchas, however, who was born before that and had not been anointed, had not been included. Okay, until now. So that's why there's this exception. And now also the sons of Pinchas are included in the Kuhuna. And again, here we have a case where it's, they call it extra-legal execution. It was in the need of the moment. It was a crisis, and he responded. And it could have gone either way. He could have been executed for murder, had that been the judgment of HaShem. So HaShem again intervenes here promptly before anybody can say anything else. And we do know that there were those who thought, he did the wrong thing. Who is this guy? He had bloodlust. He was a killer. So Hashem comes in and basically testifies on Pinchas's behalf, saying he did what needed to be done. I would have destroyed this people. I was so angry, but he did what we call today, an assassination, a targeted assassination. He assassinated the main offender, and that stopped everybody in their tracks. It was so shocking that it's just put an end to all the bad behavior. And Israel returned to themselves, and the plague ended. So that is a fascinating episode, which we can go on more about, but I want to skip ahead a bit and talk about another fascinating episode here in the book, the Parashat Pinchas. Soon after this, there's a census, again, because they're going to raise an army now and go to war against Midian and Moab. And then Hashem instructs Moshe to prepare, how to prepare for distributing the inheritances, the land inheritances that the 12 tribes will get in the land of Israel. And no sooner than that is discussed than we read in chapter 27, beginning with verse 1, about the daughters of Tzelophchad. The daughters of Tzelophchad, son of Hefer, son of Gilad, son of Machir, son of Menashe, of the families of Menashe, son of Yosef, drew near. And these are the names of his daughters, Machla, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah. And they stood before Moshe, before Eleazar the Kohen, and before the leaders and the entire assembly at the entrance in the tent of meeting, saying, Our father died in the wilderness, but he was not among the assembly that was gathered against HaShem in the assembly of Korach. But he died of his own sin, and he had no sons. Why should the name of our father be omitted from among his family, because he had no son? Give us a possession among our father's brothers. And Moshe brought their claim before HaShem. So these 5 daughters of Tzelophchad, who we know nothing about, except they point out, and as an honor to their father, really, they point out the fact that he was not part of the congregation of Korach. He didn't die among the 250 followers of Korach, and he was not and he died in the wilderness, and he was not among, does it say, I think it's already understood also, he wasn't among those who were part of the sin of the spies, obviously, but he died of his own sin. So there's some speculation as to who he was and what he died and why he died. But in any case, their claim is that he had no sons. He has no brothers to get. The inheritance went by males, obviously, and there were no males to get the inheritance, so these daughters come to claim it. And they stood before Moshe. They did something that was very bold, that they went directly before Moshe, and they stated their case emphatically and exquisitely, really. And in fact, our sages point out that what they did was extraordinary, that these 5 women were extraordinary. They stated their case so beautifully. They pointed out something that Moshe hadn't occurred to him. That and they did so in front of the entire assembly, in front of the elders, in front of the Eleazar the Kohen Gadol, in front of Moshe. They stood there and they feared no one, and they stated their case very emphatically. And in fact, the immediate response, Moshe, he directs the question to HaShem. Because he doesn't have the answer, and it says in chapter 27, verse 6, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe lemor, Ken banot Zelophehad tovrot, noton titen lehem achuzat nachala betoch achi avihem, va'avalta et nachalat avihen lehen. Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, Zelophehad's daughters speak justly, they speak rightly, they speak, there seems to be more of an implication in the Hebrew that they just spoke beautifully. I mean, Hashem, it seems, is exulting in the beauty. That this second generation of the desert, that they know their stuff. I think that's one of the things to take away from here. These daughters, they know what's going on here. They have absorbed the Torah so well that they know how to form an argument, how to present a case, how to argue in such a way that they basically present in their argument. I'm using the word argument. There wasn't no argument here, but in their case, they presented the solution, which was give us the inheritance. And so we hear afterwards immediately a whole set of new rules and regulations concerning inheritance, all because of the initiative of the 5 daughters of Zelophehad. Women are not mentioned so often in the Torah. And what we hear about women is usually very minimalistic. It's very interesting that the daughters of Zelophehad, I think, are mentioned 3 different times between now and the end of the Torah. Again, all concerning the same incident, but they are really honored. They have a very honored position in tradition. And again, the original honor came from HaShem, who made it very clear that what they said was right on the money, right on target, and again, that they stated their case so beautifully. And immediately after, because there's a very poignant Torah reading, the reading of Pinchas, because immediately after they present their case, and Hashem then enumerates the new legislation, as it were, that concerns cases like this of inheritance. Immediately after that, it says in verse 12, Hashem said to Moshe, "Go up to this mount Evarim, and look at the land." Go up to this mount Avarim, and look at the land that I have given to the children of Israel. And when you have seen it, you too shall be gathered to your people, just as Aharon your brother was gathered. So the question is asked. We learned about already in Parashat Hukat that Moshe was not going to enter into the land. The incident at Merivah, where he struck the rock twice instead of speaking to the rock in order to draw water from the rock. And Hashem said, "Since you did not sanctify my name in front of the congregation, you're not going in, you and Aharon." So he knew then that he was going to die, but and immediately afterwards he sent messengers to meet with the surrounding nations in order to try to gain safe passage through them. He, instead of sulking or throwing up his hands and saying, what has my life been about? What have I accomplished? He said, I got to get this people as soon as possible into the land because I'm not going to be around forever. So that's what he does. And now here, immediately after this ruling, and again, you can understand this as being the last bit of Torah that Moshe delivers to the people before he's instructed to go up and be gathered up into his people. And that last bit of Torah legislation had to do with the question posed to him by the daughters of Tzelophchad. But so why now? And one answer is, a traditional answer is that because the issue of inheritance has come up, and Moshe has two sons, and he has two sons, and he may be wondering, what's going to be with my children? I see what's going on. People are already concerned about what they're going to inherit, and I have two sons. What am I leaving for them? And in fact, his two sons, Gershon and Eliezer, they didn't really amount to anything. In fact, his one son Gershon, we learn in the book of Judges that there's an incident where he is referred to as Gershon, the son of Menashe. Menashe is spelled the same way as Moshe with a nun in it. But in the text, in the scroll, or in any book properly written, the nun is sort of a superscript. It's a small letter, and our sages say it was added in by scribes long ago in order to save Moshe the embarrassment, because he was actually Gershon, the son of Moshe, and he was involved in idolatry. There is a happy ending to the story that he eventually returned to the path of Torah. But in any case, Moshe really his sons didn't inherit his leadership, they didn't inherit his title, and they certainly did not inherit his prophetic ability. But in any case, he sees that the generations are passing. I mean, that's what inheritance was all about, the passing of generations. And Hashem says to him, go up to the Mount Avarim and look at the land, and when you have seen it, I will gather you to your people, just as Aharon, your brother, was gathered. And why? Again, our sages ask the question, okay, Why do you add as Aharon your brother was gathered? Because Aharon went up, and he was able to transfer his status of Kohen Gadol of high priest to his son. He was able to do it in his lifetime and pass on to him his garments, and to die with the knowledge that his son was carrying on his position and the tradition, and things were going to happen. And so Hashem is hinting maybe to Moshe that think about your position and who's going to inherit it. And Moshe immediately realizes what Hashem is hinting at, and he says in verse 16, "Let Hashem, the God of spirits of all flesh, appoint a man over the congregation." This expression, "Ruchot l'chol basar," spirits of all flesh, it's very unique that it's used here. And basically, it's sort of a reference to the fact that Ruchot Kol Basar, everybody's different. Everybody's going to have a different take on things. And everybody's going to start to argue. And we need someone who can unite the people and be an authority over the people. And so he said to Hashem, who will go forth before them and come before them? Who will lead them out and bring them in, so that the congregation of Hashem will not be like sheep without a shepherd? And of course, Hashem said to Moshe, take for yourself Yehoshua, the son of Nun, a man of spirit, a man of ruach, and you shall lay your hand upon him. Laying a hand was an expression of granting authority. So, and this is how it's an expression to this day. A samchut, smicha, is when a rabbi gets his official title of rabbi. It's called smicha. And the Sanhedrin, over the generations, it was always smicha. That's how you passed on the authority from one generation to the other, from one authority to another. And it basically originates here with this concept of putting your hand on the person that you're granting authority to. But when he actually does, a few verses later, place his hand upon Yoshua, it says he places his hands, plural, meaning that Hashem said, place one hand, and Moshe places both hands because he is so pleased and so satisfied that Yoshua has all that it's going to take, that he's got it. He's got what he needs, that Moshe, he fully endorses him, as it were, with both hands and grants him authority with both hands. That's how comforted he was that he was granting over his authority to Yoshua. One thing in those verses that we skipped over right now was, maybe I didn't skip over it. I want to make another comment. On verse 14, I'm going back a few verses. Hashem again says, when he says, you'll be gathered just as Aharon your brother was gathered, and then he continues, because you disobeyed my command in the desert of Tzin, when the congregation quarreled, when you were to sanctify me through the water before their eyes. These are the waters of dispute at Kadesh, Mei Merivah, in the desert of Tzin. So why is that mentioned again? Is Hashem like rubbing his nose in it? One understanding is that Moshe wanted it to be known that he did not die in the wilderness because he was part of the people who rejected the land of Israel. He wasn't one of the people who accepted the diba ta'aretz, the evil speech concerning the land that the spies brought back. So it was important to him to be distinguished because he had his own reason for not going into the land. It wasn't the spies. We've covered some ground here. I hope I've been able to impart some insight into this very poignant aspect of Parashat Pinchas. There's much more to talk about. We didn't get to it. It's the way it goes on Temple Talk. Thanks for being with me.